Thank you all for being here. And you'll get to know a whole lot more about Jim, those of you who've never met him before. But Jim has long been a dear friend and a colleague and support to our businesses on the import and wholesale side, or distribution side of things. But in addition to that, he was a retailer long before that. He also, Jim, you were in the restaurant biz, right?
Well,
You've done it all.
I was in the restaurant business in downtown Washington for many years, and I was the food and beverage director of the Willard Hotel when I finally gave it up for the wine trade. So,
yeah, so he is clearly a great source of experience and information for me personally and for Unwind. So it's such a pleasure to have him, as well as our other hosts, Jess and Vicky. And I look forward to seeing what everybody thinks of this, of the outcome of tonight's theme. It's so much fun to talk about the iconic wines of Italy and Italian wines. The study of Italian wines has long been a passion of mine. So, you know, I would say, is there a final answer of, is it worth the splurge? We're going to find out. I think it's based on producer, it's based on vintage, it's based on, you know, how long you've aged the wines and what you love. But this is kind of I think a good basis for deciding. So thank you, everyone. Jess?
Thanks, Vanessa. And for those that don't know, that is Vanessa, Unwind's proprietor. So for those that have not met Vanessa yet, she is the proprietor of Unwind and just an amazing wine person all around. And so I'm going to let Vicky introduce herself first, and then we'll start talking with Jim.
So in addition to owning Unwind, Vanessa also owns Revel, which is a wine and craft beer bar next to the Unwind Bellevue store. And I'm the wine director there.
Thanks, Vicky. And I think a lot of you know me. I'm Jess Outer. I'm a wine associate at Unwind King Street, and also I own Uncorked Events, where I bring the wine bar to you. So we have teamed up together where we're bringing wine to you in this virtual world. So tonight I want to welcome Jim Hutton from Vias Imports, and he's going to take us on a journey through Italy. And we're going to talk about these 4 amazing wines, and we're going to talk about if it's worth the splurge. We want this to be as interactive as possible, so feel free to jump in and ask questions at any time. You could put them in the chat. You could ask them of any of us. But we hope you enjoy talking with Jim, talking with all of us, and especially the wine. So Jim, over to you.
thank you very much. I appreciate being here. We'll take a little stroll through 2 regions of Italy. First, I'd like to tell you a little bit about who I am and my company real quick. Vias is a company that stands for Vitigni Italiani Autoctoni Selezionati. What does that mean? It means an indigenous selection of Italian wines, and it was started 30 some years ago by a young sommelier at the time who was a wine educator for 10 years. And during the bad old days of Italian wine, when mostly the things were just exported for grocery store kind of shelves, he started to find the artisanal, the family wineries, and put together a little company with some wine producers as partners to bringing these wines into the United States. Now, of course, many people are doing that. He also serves on the Tasting Commission for the Department of Agriculture for Italy. And we have a technical director, a man named Enrico Paternoster, from the great Institute Agrario San Michele, which is a great wine school where all the wines are tested. So he looks for the finest families in each region of Italy to bring to the United States. And so that's sort of what, pardon me, Vias is about. My approach to wine, and I think many people's approach to wine, is to try to find wines that really reflect a place. In other words, the grapes, the wines express parcels of land and also the sensitivity of the human person, as opposed to wines that are formulated for a flavor or a type. And that's what we're going to delve into tonight. So what I want to do is I want to talk first about the region, and a little bit about the grape variety, the family, and then we'll taste the wine. So bear with me for a little while. Piedmont, if you don't know, is the northwest section of Italy. It is Piemonte, the foot of the mountain. It is an area that is surrounded three sides by the Alps. And it was formed many 30 million years ago by where two massive subcontinents crashed into each other, separated and crashed into each other, forming this deep lagoon of like marine clay soils, which were then thrust up into ridges, which created the area where the wines are grown today. It's a very important, this very complex conglomeration of soils and the actual taste and styles of the wines. The Nebbiolo grape of Piedmont, the only other grape similar is in a way Pinot Noir, which really expresses the soils, the place. Other grapes don't have that quite sensitivity. It's a grape that, pardon me, was first grown in the 1300s, and then really it wasn't until the middle of the 1800s where a couple of aristocrats who resided in the Turin area decided that they wanted to make their local wine in the French style. You have to realize that Piedmont was the Savoyards, the kingdom of Savoy, who had French possessions, and there was a lot of Burgundian influence that came back and forth. The Nebbiolo grape, which is a grape that the word Nebbiolo means sort of fog. Nebbia, we have the word nebulous clouds. In any event, if you look at the grapes, there's a little waxy bloom on the grapes. It looks kind of fog-like white. And so that's sort of where the name came from. The other idea is when you pick this grape, it's in October when you have these cold fogs that come up into the vineyards. If you want to show the little map of Barolo, that would be great. I don't know if you can pull that up, but in any event. So if you think about wine, okay, there's Napa Valley. That's pretty no, we want to go to Barolo villages. Perfect. Yeah, thank you. If you think about wine, you think about places like Napa Valley. Okay, that's a valley. If you know Burgundy, it's a single slope. And if you look at Piedmont, it's a mess. It's a series of ridges. And the word Langa Hills, which is on the label, the Nebbiolo Langa, is the old Latin word for tongues. It's sort of tongue-like ridges. And if you look at these different areas, you'll find villages. Unlike Burgundy, where they named the wine after a specific village, all the wines are labeled either Nebbiolo or Barolo, and you really have to kind of dig down to see where the producer comes from. And what we're going to be talking today is this area called Serralunga, the little pink area over there. And that is, pardon me, the oldest geographical region of Piedmont with the highest calcium soils. And the calcium soils make stern and long-lived Barolo and Barbaresco. So back to the, you can take that out now, thank you. Back to the idea of Barolo. The aristocrats, et cetera, brought in French enologists in the middle of the 1800s and fashioned wine in the dry French style. And there was a lady, Madame Faletti, who lived in the village of Barolo and was the first to bottle a wine named Barolo. So that was the beginning of it. So Nebbiolo is a lovely grape to grow. It flowers early, so it's subject to spring damage. It's very vigorous, so you have to work like hell during the whole season to cut back and to keep it pruned. And it will not ripen until very into late September, October. So you need that warm Indian summer, fall. So you have to go to church and pray that you don't get too much rain. And that's the reason it's expensive. But it is a wine that is elegant and powerful at the same time. So let's taste the first wine, Nebbiolo Langa, okay? So this is basically from the Giovanni Rosso family and the Canale family. I have to mention the ladies because both sides of this family, the mother's side and the father's side, were very much involved in winemaking from the 1800s. And then in the 1940s, they replanted the vineyards after the destruction of the Second World War. In the 1980s, they revived the vineyards with better plantings. And then a young man at the time, 27 years old, back in 2001, Davide Rosso became the winemaker. And he studied in France and he made wine in Burgundy. And so here again, we have a little bit of a connection to France and great Pinot Noir. He came back to his home and he wants a wine that expresses basically the area where he's from. And also, he doesn't want to put too much intrusion in the wine. So as we taste the wine, let's do that first because people will get thirsty listening to me. And then we'll talk a little bit about the structure and why this wine is made the way it is. So this is the Nebbiolo Langhe. Okay. Now this wine is made in a little bit different way than a Barolo, but many people call it a baby Barolo. So please take a sip and tell me what you think. I'd like to hear from you, please.
And if you'd like to share, you can take yourself off mute, or you can also use the chat if you don't feel like speaking.
I have a question.
Yes.
Are there any effects of climate change on the growing seasons or the grapes or anything now?
Absolutely. It's good and bad, actually. It's kind of weird. There's definitely a warming climate. And if I go back to the Nebbiolo grape, it is a grape that's very, very fickle about where it grows. And in the ancient days, they would see on the side of the slopes, which is usually the middle of the hill, where the snow melted first. And that's where they would plant the Nebbiolo grape. That's the sorry or sunny spot. Today, because of the warming, those are difficult because they have to change the way they manage the canopy, the leaves over the vines, etc., so that there's not too much heat and sunburn. I'll call it sunburn. That's not really very scientific. But and they're also finding more even vintages, which is helpful, you know, commercially. But the great long growing season, the cooler growing seasons are less and less. And 2016, for example, was a recent one that was a classic, and everybody's going crazy about the 2016 vintage, excuse me. And some of the pundits are giving scores like 97 to 98 points for these wines because of their long aging potential and their concentration. The other thing that's happening is that where the Nebbiolo doesn't do well, which is cooler areas, now they're ripping out, unfortunately, very nice grapes like the Dolcetto grape and planting Nebbiolo in marginal areas. We'll see whether that pans out. So far, it's made okay wine, but not really great wine. So there's absolutely, definitely climate change affecting everything, the way they work in the vineyards and also the way they plant. So thank you for that question. So what do you think of this wine?
Very nice.
I have a question for everyone. What about the aromatics of what you know of Nebbiolo or what you're observing now? What do you guys think? Are they pronounced or are they kind of quiet? What do you guys think?
Are you saying in these particular wines or in Nebbiolo as a general rule?
Both. No, both.
I smell cherry.
Very
Kind
good.
of Swedish,
Yes.
sweetish.
Yes.
Dark, yeah, definitely dark cherry. I mean, it's young, so it's going to give me, so it's pretty aromatic. I mean, you definitely going to get quite a bit on the nose.
Well, that's a great comment because the Nebbiolo grape and the Pinot Noir grape are the two most aromatic grapes, red grapes that I know of. A lot of nuance there, different raspberry, cherry, etc.
Yep.
And as the wine develops, the old classic expression was tar and roses. So you get almost a floral character and then a very unusual character. I can't describe it. You know, everybody has to describe wines from their own personal life experience. So if you read about these descriptions from these pundits, you know, take it with a grain of salt. Just make up your own wine and have fun with the wine. How is the structure of the wine? It's dry, but is it too?
I was surprised how, I mean, I always think of Nebbiolo as being acidic, and this may go back to the fact that, like I said, I just brushed my teeth, but I was surprised at the acidity level on the Langhe. I thought it was tartar than than I expected.
Tartar, really?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really good.
Mhm.
It was a little tartar than, and I mean, I do think of Pinot Noir and Nebbiolo as having a certain tartness to them, but
It's a very unusual situation because the Nebbiolo grape is a very thin-skinned grape. So you're never going to get a lot of color. You're going to get a delicate color.
Mm.
Color is no real degree of power. And so, but those skins are very tannic. And so you have to soften the tannins. And I think that Giovanni Rosso, Davide Rosso, the winemaker, does a very nice job because he uses very large French oak that softens the tannins. And that's the only reason really for barrel aging, gets to soften those tannins through micro-oxygenation. A little bit of the oxygen comes through the pores of the woods. If you use a small barrel, it can be very aggressive and you'll get wood tones. And he doesn't like that. He wants to, again, express the vineyard. So you're going to get the tannin structure softened a little bit. I think, and I will tell you this, if you had a little bit of food with this, it would sweeten right out. But to tell you a little bit about this wine, what is Nebbiolo Langhe? First of all, it is from the Barolo area, and you can declassify Barolo and call it Nebbiolo Langhe if you want to. So you can take younger vines, which he has done from Barolo vineyards, and also some very close peripheral vineyards to Barolo vineyards in the little area of Valley Mondo and other Langhe DOC vineyards. And he's blended those together. Now he's blended younger vines, 10 years old, up to 35-year-old vines. Now, what does that mean? 10-year-old vines or a younger vine doesn't have the concentration that an older vine has. The older vine produces less fruit, but it's very much more concentrated. And also in the vineyard work, they try to respect that too. And so you have, when you come into the winery, grapes, et cetera, that need less time in fermentation, in technical maceration, et cetera. Here it's about 12 days, 15 days. And then in the aging process, it's less than a year. So 6 to 8 months in a very large barrel to soften the tannins, and then a few months in bottle. And it's really, go away, pussycat. Sorry, hello.
Aw.
Anyway, sorry. It's after dinner and they like lap time, but sorry. Anyway, so it's really meant, what I call this is a Wednesday wine. It's for a fun dinner, a casual dinner on a Wednesday with a few friends, as opposed to the Saturday night wine, which we'll have next. So.
well, and I mean, I don't know about with the Rosso family, but traditionally, I think a lot of times people bottle the younger vines from their property as Langhes, and for two reasons. One is what you were talking about, maybe because they're younger vines, they tend not to be as complex, but also it allows them to have a cash flow, a positive cash flow situation, because the Langhe wines have less strict aging requirements, and because they can then sell them more quickly, they're able to have access to cash that they do not get, because if they're bottling it as a Barolo, they have to age it for a longer period of time, and therefore they don't get their cash quite as quickly.
Absolutely correct. And there was a time when Barolo was shunned, and it was hard to even give it away because of the nature decades ago. But absolutely correct. And also, I think it's very important to introduce people to this grape variety and to Barolo, because if you wait around to buy a $50 bottle of wine or $40 bottle of wine, it may be a long time before you would really get to appreciate the different expressions, the different levels. And the same thing is for red Burgundy, a Nuit Saint-Georges, a Pommard, a Givry Chambertin. You can go and buy a beautiful Bourgogne Rouge from a good producer and have a lovely experience. And again, not every night is the big night where you have significant food that marries with the structure of these wines. So let's take on to the next wine, unless there's a couple of other comments on the Nebbiolo.
Well, the only thing I wanted to mention is that even though this is like considered like the lesser of the wines, it still does have some tannin to it. You can run your tongue around the bottom part of your mouth and you can pick up some dusty tannins on it. So that's, I think, a really interesting aspect of the grape itself.
The wine is definitely age worthy for a few years. You know, they typically say, obviously people will age wine as long as they, they think they can, but I think 10 years, I like a wine at 10 years. And the reason is this is personal taste. I still like the fruit to be a part of the composition as opposed to the tertiary, just earthy flavors, which you get in a very old wine. But these Barolos will last decades. So, and again, it's because of the tannin structure. But again, it's nice to be able to enjoy, and I hope more people will enjoy the Nebbiolo grape. It's my favorite, along with Pinot Noir. There's a lot of wine in the world, and this is something to discover. Thanks. Okay, Barolo. Let's dive into this first, and then we'll talk. Comments about the nose when you can, please.
Say no.
No. You have to unmute yourself.
No, I already unmuted.
No, I muted us back because we were clinking around.
For me, I think that Nebbiolo is one of the easier, not that it's easy, but easier wines to blind taste, because has such a distinctive fragrance and visual too. You look at these wines and one has a more concentrated color, but they look almost orangey brown even when they're young at times. So they're kind of easy. Nebbiolo gives itself away, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Agree, and additionally with the tannic structure. It's one of the most tannic wines there is. And pretty much if you get a light colored wine with huge tannins, you know, that's kind of where you just head right off to Nebbiolo for that.
As opposed to this Barolo.
No, but I'm talking about the Barolo. Yeah, I'm talking about when you're blinding any Nebbiolos, so Barolos, Barbarescos, or just a Longue, but especially Barolos and Barbarescos, the tannic structure is so strong, and yet the wines are light colored.
So you
more concentrated than normal.
Yeah, you don't see the word Nebbiolo on the label of Barolo or Barbaresco, but that's what it is by definition. So, yeah, because otherwise a Longue designate wine could be, I think it's like 13 grape varieties, 12 or 13 that are allowed to be grown there. They may even be a blend. So
that's why this concept that, I don't know if it was Jess or Vanessa or James who came up with it, but the idea of having wines from two different regions, but the wines from each region, so the Piedmont or from when we're going to Campania, they're both the same grape. It's just whether or not you want to pay more for the one that has I guess, for lack of a better word, you would say a better pedigree.
Well, it's a completely different selection of fruit, and different vineyards as well. And the Barolo area, again, is a series of different ridges and different villages. Most of the wine, all the wine is going to be named Barolo after one village, but then there are different sub areas like Burgundy, but they're not really on the label except in the address of the winemaker that you can discover. There are some subtle differences between the different areas, the different villages. The Serralunga area is the one that is very highly rated, and that's what you're drinking. But this is a blend. So just like Burgundy, it's a blend of different vineyards. And here you have a blend of different Barolo villages. So you have Serralunga fruit, which is the more austere, high calcium soil fruit. You have a vineyard around the village itself of Barolo, which is a little bit softer, a little bit more gentle, a little bit rounded. And then there's a third village that's in this blend called Castellone Folletto, which kind of is a mixed bag. It's here and there. It can be more powerful, it can be more neutral, etc. But the vines here are 20 to 35 years old. So you're dealing with very concentrated fruit. that he brings into the winery, and he does maceration on the skins for the color, extraction, etc., and the fermentation, double the time of the last wine, 25 to 30 days. And then the aging is, again, in the same barrels, is done 24 to 36 months, so 2 to 3 years, and then 6 months of bottle aging. So to really soften this wine and to make it this complete dense unit, there's a lot of work that goes into it. So not only is it the best fruit, but the oldest vines, a lot of labor in the vineyards, and the long process of winemaking, why the wine is the cost that it is. I find a brooding nature to this wine, meaning that there's this power that just is under the skim, you know, like a lake at dawn. Like you just see this powerful like body of water, but there's nothing really jumps out at you. And then as it opens up with air, and that's really important for these wines, to open them before your dinner party or whatever, and they will come out. And so as you work with these, you're going to see more and more nuances. But there's a depth of fruit here, and there's also a depth of alcohol with glycerin sweetness that does balance this very firm, dry acidity and tannic acid. So this is a kind of a nice vintage. This is a pretty nice wine. I hope you enjoy it. I know you need a little cheese or something with it, though. So tell me more. What do you think, please? Do you see how the nose is really starting to come out a little bit more and more and more, you know? So.
Man, I just thought it was complex. It had some different, you know, I felt like there was everything from a little bit of, you know, really dark currant,
Yeah.
cherry currant,
Yes.
even a little eucalyptus and mint.
Okay. Yep. Herbal character. Yes. Yep. Super. So the complexity is the beauty of wine, and I hope you enjoy this.
This is lovely.
This is a fabulous bottle of wine.
Thank you. This is a very, very highly rated producer. If you go and Google the Rosso family, you're going to find him in all the magazines, and being one of the great families of the Serralunga Ridge. And above this, he has single vineyard Barolos. They're quite they're expensive, but they're quite intense. And those are not wines you really need to lay those wines down. I'm running out of time. I'm getting older, so I'm going to drink Nebbiolo, I think. But in any event, Kevin and Brian, you can lay some stuff down.
Hey, Jim.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
Ann and I started drinking Barolos in the 70s.
Yes.
I remember back then when you bought a Barolo, you set it away for 10 years and you left it alone.
Yes.
And then it seems to me that they're making them a little bit more approachable. Is that a correct or incorrect thought?
It's been a very historic evolution between the older generation and the new generation. If you, I'm going to wax a little bit too long maybe, but I grew up on a farm, so I know what farming is about. In the old days, these peasant farmers, this is not like the chateaus of Bordeaux and the great wine estates. This is like Burgundy. These are peasant farmers. And so they had other crops to deal with. And so the other thing was they had no infrastructure of water. So in the latter part of the summer, sometimes the wells went dry. They couldn't clean the winery, et cetera, and they had to go get the wheat. And so these wines were left in barrel a very long time, creating very tannic wines. And so you're absolutely right. There was a structural difference in those days. And then we had the kids that came along and wanted to follow the barrique, the small berry, the California, experiment, et cetera. And there was a whole thing going on. And 10 years later, they found that those wines didn't age that well. So now they're coming back to a more sensible balance of production techniques. So you're absolutely correct. Back in those days, some of those wines were hard as nails and it took them forever to come around. And now there is a more balanced approach. I think it's superior. You can enjoy the wines. They still have the integrity, but it's not it's not the desperate old winemaking techniques that were occurring in a more impoverished time. So.
Well, and Jim, I mean, my understanding is the times you're talking about when they were like practicing polyculture and they were having a hard time like juggling the different crops. They also didn't destem as much, and they weren't as good at like taking the seeds out and everything. And so the wines would sit on the stems and the seeds for a very long time. So they not only picked up the tannins from already a tannic grape,
You had the
but
green
then
tannins. You
they
had the green
picked up
tannins.
the green tannins from the stems and the seeds too.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
And thank goodness they started destemming them, because now you just have the beautiful tannins, and you have to admit these are gorgeous tannins from the grape itself, not from the stems and the
Well,
seeds.
Piedmont has been discovered, and Barolo is starting to be discovered as other great wines are so expensive. Relatively speaking to Great Burgundy, you can find some really fascinating wines in Piedmont and Barolo that will be a little bit less expensive, and hopefully you'll discover those and enjoy them like you would a great red Burgundy. But you're absolutely correct. I think today, in terms of balance, these wines are the best that it's ever been. I believe and we are enjoying, well, for Italy as general, this is the true greatest golden period of Italian wine in thousands of years. You know, Italy has, I won't go into the history, but they were completely destroyed back and forth. And you follow the vineyards. And now today, after decades of peace, we're really seeing some exciting wines. The only thing is it's hard to deal with them because there's so many grapes and so many names that people, it's a journey of discovery. So, and in saying that, we'll go to Campania. So,
But before we go, I want to tell you, Jim, the Barolo opened up amazingly well in the glass in just this 15, 20 minutes.
This is elegant wine.
Yeah.
This is a beautiful, elegant wine.
Yes.
And, there's no cedar. There's no awkward moments. It is a wine, like I said, for Saturday night. Cook something really good. Open this. You will not be disappointed.
Cook something really good. What in your mind would you serve this with?
Yeah.
Well, you know, Piedmont has the French influence in their cuisine. They do, just to do that, they do a lot of the boiled meats. They do a lot of fresh vegetables in the bagna calda and the garlic. You have risottos with the truffles and the wild mushrooms, which give that earthy character, which is perfect for these, with the different soft cheeses that they have. It's egg noodles, tagliatelle, agnolotti. This is the cuisine of Piedmont, and you know, so that's what I would enjoy. Obviously, you can a piece of veal, a piece of beef, etc. But I experiment more with wine and food now than ever before in my life, and I find amazing combinations that actually work. So I'm not a set piece when I tell you that, you know, white with fish, etc. That type of thing.
So I will say that we enjoyed this this wine tonight with a Brasato Barolo, and so I opened another Nebbiolo that we had that wasn't the good Barolo that you were having with this one, but we braised it overnight. So we did a 4-hour braise with a lovely piece of beef, and it really added so much to it. I mean, it's a really perfect food wine. I mean, that tannin, that structure really goes so well with food. So
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I think a braise, like a braise with this would be amazing.
the hell, dude?
For the first wine, the Longue Nebbiolo, I had this a while back, and I did homemade pasta carbonara with it, and it was flawless because it just cut through that fat perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a proponent of there are two different pairing ways of doing things, and some people like to match, and I actually like to use opposites. So what you were talking about, is it Lisa Ann or just Lisa?
Just Lisa.
Okay, so what you were talking about, where the acidity of the wine cut through the richness of the pasta. See, that's how I like to pair. I like to do opposites attract, and so I think that's a really good suggestion.
And just one last thing, Jim, about vintages with Barolo, since we're drinking 15 and the 16s are coming, and they're both fantastic vintages.
Well, the vintage, it's a weather report, and it starts with the snow. Do you have snow in the winter, and do you have cool springs with lots of water? Because you need water retention for the vines, because the summer will be very hot. And then what we look for is the beautiful Indian summer in September. And here's when all the sugars are ripening at the end of August, but you need to sweeten the tannins from the skins, the pips, and et cetera. So you need these cool nights, warm days, and everybody says the same thing, but it's absolutely essential, and it's classic in the Piedmont area, where you go through the entire September period into October to make the tannin sweet, and then you pick the grapes. 2015 was they're considering it exceptional. It was cold and wet in the spring, like I was talking about, and they had good snow, so that gave a lot of groundwater retention for a very hot summer, and then they had good harvest conditions with no rain. So 2015 is considered one of the exceptional vintages. Now 2016, which is coming next, it was absolutely pristine, perfect weather, and they picked a little bit later, and they have this depth, a little bit more depth in 2015. And so right now, everybody's oohing and eyeing about 2016. So we have two back-to-back really fine vintages. I will say that 2016 is going to take the cake for aging the wine for a longer period of time because of the structure that was built into the longer picking, et cetera. I'd have to look up exactly the picking dates, different dates in October, but I'm thinking it was a week or two later in 16. So, but there was nothing, there was absolutely nothing. It was a perfect, beautiful, we had a nice summer up here in Garrett County. It usually rains like hell. It was sort of like, this is in Western Maryland. It was sort of like that last summer, which was a terrible for other reasons, but it was beautiful weather. And that's what happened in 2016. Now, 2018 is a little hard for me to assess because I really have this, they're too new for the Barolos. It was a cold spring, hot summer, again, same thing. They had good weather in the harvest. I think it was a little warm. So as years from now, when we look at the 2018 Barolos, we may find them okay, very nice, very good, but not to the exceptional depth that the 2015 or 2016 has. And those are the two vintages I think you're having today. So anyway, I hope that helps, whatever vintage people.
No, that's correct. That's correct.
So anyway, okay, next wines. So we move completely to a different world, the world of Campania. Campania, and if you want to throw up the map of Campania, maybe. Let's see if we can find, no, Serralunga. Here we go, Campania. Okay, so Campania is in the southern area of Italy. Is there another map? I think there's another map that gives you a southern attack. There we go. Go back to the toe of Italy. There we go. Okay. So we're in the very southern part of Italy, the toe and the heel, and you can see Campania on the left in the light blue. If you're not familiar with that name, it is the region of Napoli. It is an ancient area of Greek colonization from the 7th and 8th centuries. Even in the Roman era, people spoke Greek in the town, or the Napolitanis or Napoli. And that culture brought the vines. And so it was already basically, I'll call it civilized when the Romans came down. If you look at Campania, it's obviously on the coast. You can divide it from a wine point of view and from a topography point of view in two strips. And on the coast, you have basically the warm Mediterranean climate. And this includes basically Naples and the ancient towns of Herculaneum and Pompeii, the ruins. Of course, Mount Vesuvius is right behind that, and the beautiful Riviera of the south, the Amalfi Coast. And that's where people go and they enjoy Naples. You probably know this area because of the food. People don't realize that they call it the unification of Italy in 1860. Well, it's basically like our Civil War. And in both cases, the South lost. And so you had tremendous immigration in the 1800s and into the early 20th centuries of Italians coming into America from Naples. And they brought with them what? Spaghetti and tomato sauce, hard pasta and tomato sauce. They brought this thing called pizza. They brought this thing called mozzarella, eggplants, etc. So, you know, this is our idea of Italian food and gelato and things like that. But that is really very Neapolitan. And so that's sort of a little bit of the background of the area. And it's a wonderful place, obviously, to visit for the coastal attractions. But what we're going to be talking about is the Highlands. And now you can go to that other map, if you could. That one, yes. Okay, so you can see along the coast, you know, you have Napoli, etc. Salerno, very nice, beautiful. This is where they make the limoncello, very beautiful organic lemons. And you go to Avellino, and this is where the Mastroberardino family is, and where the great wines of Campania are made, and also to a certain extent in Benevento. So in any event, so again, this is an area which was incredibly poor and really destroyed. And so other areas of Italy, when they were replanting and revitalizing their vineyards into the 20th century, you know, brought in foreign grape varieties like Tuscany. You have the Super Tuscans with Cabernet, et cetera. But Campania did not. And there was a couple of reasons. There was a root louse, phylloxera. It's a little bug that just would bore into the roots and basically open the vines and kill the vines. And it completely destroyed all the vineyards of Europe. And they grafted onto American rootstock and they solved the problem. But here, because of these high mountains and these volcanic soils, that little bug had more difficulty. So some of the ancient vines back to the Greek era were maintained. The other thing was abject poverty. They just couldn't afford to replant. And so this became this cradle after the Second World War of ancient vines that had sort of gone into hardly any production. And one of the great families that came out of that was the Mastroberardino family of the Terrador estate. And that family is sort of like the Mondavis to Napa Valley. In the 60s, Robert Mondavi goes to Napa Valley, and all of a sudden, boom, Napa Valley, along with other producers, becomes the big thing, you know. And so they were the ones that came back and saved some of these ancient grape varieties from basically commercial extinction, like Fiano and Greco for the whites, and Aglianico, which is what we're going to talk about for the reds. So they are in a very high mountainous area. You have, again, continental climate. You got cold winters and you got hot summers, just like Piedmont, just like the Barolo area. And so this allows the wines to reach a depth and a fragrance and an intensity that other areas of Campania cannot happen. We're going to talk about the Aglianico grape, okay? Aglianico, okay, what does that mean? And it's been called around the town of Tarazzi, and you're going to taste the Tarazzi, and you're going to taste the young vines Aglianico, named after the grape. It's called the Barolo of the South. It's considered the greatest Southern wine because of its longevity and its complexity, and it really shines in mountainous regions. However, it's different because it is growing on volcanic subsoils. And this gives a completely different flavor and intensity and nuance to the wines there as opposed to other places. Some people say this was a grape that was brought in by the Greeks, and the name means Hellenic, of Greek origin. And when you look at the DNA research, there's no Greek grapes that are associated with this particular grape variety. The first mention was in the 1500s, and the Spanish, the Bourbon kings, dominated this area. It was called the Kingdom of Two Sicilies for quite some time. And there, the Spanish word for llano, meaning the wine from the plains, the double L-A-N-O, llano, seems to be the origin of the name Aglianico. Okay? And again, It's probably a grape that ancient grape that originated in this area. In 80 BC, the Romans conquered the town of Tarazzi, and they found good winemaking. So what they did was they then brought in colonists from Liguria to propagate this area. And this is where the Master Berardino makes its wine. So we're going to taste two wines. We're going to taste, oh, and by the way, another similarity of this grape, it flowers early, it's very prolific. You got to really maintain it in the vineyards, and it doesn't ripen until October, November, even later. So there is a great similarity between this grape from the farmer's point of view to Nebbiolo. However, the taste is completely different. And the nuances of these volcanic soils will give you a chocolate character and all kinds of different things, which is a little bit different. But let's taste the Young Vines version first, if you don't mind. And we'll taste the Aglianico Campagna. So Campagna from Terra d'Oro. By the way, the Master Berardino family had an estate, a vineyard estate for the mother, Dora di Paolo. And so the name of the winery is honoring the mother, Terra d'Oro, the land of Dora di Paolo. That's where the name comes from. So take a look. It's much darker, of course, a little bit different, and see what you think of this wine. I need help. Tell me what you think. Tell me what it's like. My palate's shot. I'm too old, you know.
Barnyard.
There you go. Very good.
I find this is so even and smooth. It's just very different than the Nebbiolo. And I personally think it's much more pleasing.
Can't figure out who's talking.
That's Christine, I think.
Yeah, it's me. We're
over there. Okay, I'm sorry. I could hear somebody, but I was trying to figure out who it was.
You have a balance and a roundness in the mouth, and the tannin structure is not as pronounced.
Yeah.
And so really, it's a very approachable, nice wine because of that. And it really is because of the way they've made the wine, and they respect the grape, but they are trying to have, first of all, this grape is one of the most tannic and difficult grapes to grow and to mature. And what they're really trying to do here is to take this marvelous grape and to make it a little bit more approachable for more everyday drinking. And you're going to get these nuances, I mean, these unbelievable nuances, these soily, funny, unusual flavors coming from this particular soils, these volcanic subsoils, et cetera. The vineyards here are about 1,350 feet up. So again, you know, you're starting with the higher altitude. The other vineyards go up to 1,800 feet, which is quite high for vineyards. And the vines here are only 10 years old. So these are a selection of younger vines. Mature, vine produces fruit after 3 years. So mature to a certain extent, but not, not old vines like we were tasting before for concentration. They do harvest this at the end of October, but not quite as late as the next wine you're going to taste. And this is all stainless steel in terms of the fermentation and the maceration, which is very short. It's not too long, maybe about 7 days. When you macerate on the skins and you ferment, quick, because again, you don't want to extrude too much tannin. And then the aging here is done half in stainless steel and half in French smaller barrels, blending them back together, again, for harmony, a little bit of softening, but not too much wood, etc. And then 6 months, and then 2 months in bottle, and then here we are, a wine for every day. So that is the integrity of, or the process or the idea of this wine.
I don't have the bottle in front of me. What's the alcohol content?
It should be 14. Usually they are higher. These let me go back. You have to have 14% alcohol in Nebbiolo because of the structure. If you don't have that little bit of more boost of glycerin, which gives you a slight bit of sweetness, then you're out of balance. Let me see. I've got my little.
Is the
bottle? Sorry, I was trying to find my mute button. Bottle says 13%.
13, okay, fine. So a little lighter, and the Tarazi's gotta be 14, it better be.
And before we get to that, Jim, I have to point out that 2 of our guests have special bottles of Tarazi, and that's Barbara and Lisa. So they'll be tasting the top of the line while the rest of us taste the basic Tarazi.
Okay, well, they're both different because of the vineyard locations. The one that most of us are tasting are from 2 vineyards, Lapio and Monte Meleto. And the other one, I think you have Pago de Fusi, is that correct?
Yes.
And that is that is a different vineyard expression, and it's going to be a subtle difference. So the Tarazi is going to be fairly much the same, but again, it's only a vineyard derivation that you're going to have. The winemaking and the processing is pretty much the same for both of those. It's just a vineyard selection. I'm envious. I don't get to taste that very often. So, in any event, what do you think of the little Aglianico?
Jim, I've got a question about that. If I was going to serve this for dinner,
Yes.
how long would you open it? Would you decant it? Would you aerate it?
This one, not 20 minutes. I
Really?
like to open a wine a little bit because, you know, I'm not bragging, but I had I had a couple of old bottles of Barolo with my nephew who doesn't visit very often. Anyway, and we opened it, and when I first opened it, it was to me it was like volatile. It didn't there's nothing there, and then boom, it started. And so I like to open wines, and particularly the Barolo and others, definitely. Or you can decant them to aerate them. It really does help half an hour before. Everybody makes up their own mind, but the little Aglianico, it's always good to open it, have a sip for yourself, and let it come out. You never know, you know, they're in bondage, you know, these wines, and they need to come out. So
Well, actually, we had the Nebbiolo and the Barolo open for 3 hours before.
well, that shouldn't hurt it.
Well, so Anne, is it kind of an assault to your palate? Because
Yeah, a little bit.
I think then you would just definitely want to serve it to your guest with some cured meat, or, you know, something that can really stand up to it.
But I think it would really even out with some decanting and air.
This particular one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It reminds me of a teenager that has a lot of potential, but they're a little rough around the edges.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. This is a very, very stern grape variety. So you'll see next.
This is like pizza night wine. This is
Yes.
homemade pizza, not
Right.
not Domino's.
So what are you doing tomorrow night, Kevin?
We're making the homemade Friday night is homemade pizza night. Drinking his bottle.
That's the same in my house because we do Zoom meeting, not me, but my wife does Zoom meetings all week long. And then she makes pizza tomorrow or no, Saturday. And it's fun. It's great, you know.
Oh, yeah.
But again, any wine like this, you need, because it's made to be with food. This is food. Wine to me is food. You need a little something to go with it. You know, it's not, these are structural wines. These are serious wines, even the lighter versions, you know. So a little bit of something with them and they'll shine. They'll sweeten right up in the mouth. So
I find them plenty sweet. I think that the idea of putting some salami with it, the salt would kind of really balance that out.
Yeah, we do
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I apologize.
That's fine. We do a prosciutto. We do a prosciutto and fig, and fig pizza, and that's going to go really, really
Right.
well.
Oh, if this is a little bit rough around the edges, to me, that kind of sums up Naples, because Naples is a little bit rough around the edges, and it just sort of seems like it's what it should be.
well,
I like that.
the Italians, and I'm going to get, I'm in dangerous territory here. The Italians call wines from other places, particularly the New World, marmellata wines, marmalade, jam, and they do not like the big jammy flavors. They like more subtlety and more structure. And so this is a taste to work with different moments of your life and different foods. And so this is the Mastroberardino family wants to follow a traditional path. A little bit of backstory: there were two brothers that started this family together, Walter and his brother Antonio. And in the 90s, they kind of split. You'll find some wines in the market named Mastroberardino, but Walter wanted to follow a more traditional expression of the grape, which is what you're tasting. And the other brother made it a little bit more, I'll call it California in style, with a little bit of new wood and different nuances. I'm not saying either is bad, they're both fabulous, but they're both different styles and different philosophical approaches. So I totally understand a little bit of the austerity of this wine. So, okay. So, Tarazi. I said earlier, Tarazi was the ancient town which was known in pre-Roman times for fine winemaking. And because of the location and the particular highlands and volcanic soils, this has become, along with one other, the most prestigious place for the grape Aglianico. This is 100% Aglianico. If I didn't explain this, if you look at Italian label, there's DOC and there's DOCG. And this is basically the Appalachian Contrôlé system of Italy, where a place, the wines that are made in a particular place that are allowed to put that place name on the label are very controlled. It means Denominazione di Origine Controllata. It means the dominion and the origin of the wine are controlled. And when you get to DOCG, there are more stern regulations, more restrictive. It means garantita. And so this moves to the DOCG level, et cetera. So you're going to find this a pretty stern wine. Like I said, it is very, very tannic grape, a very difficult grape. So you've got here vine ages of about 20 years, okay? The harvest time is November, so even later than October, the beginning of November, to really allow those grapes to soften as much as possible on the vines, the tannin structure that they bring. The fermentation is, again, in stainless steel. The maceration is a little bit longer, 15 to 18 days, so you get a little more extraction. And then the aging process to soften this monster is in French barrique, which is the smaller barrel, which is a little bit more aggressive, half, and then also parts in Slavonian oak, which is larger and a little bit less aggressive in terms of the wood tannins and the effect on the wine. And that's for 2 years. So after that, they age this wine in bottle 2 to 3 years. So, you know, it's a very long process. And about 3 to 4 years, depending on the vintage, depending on the lots of wines, et cetera, back and forth. So what you're trying to do is to create a wine of great depth, and at the same time, to try to bring it into some harmonious relationship. So this is Tarazi, 2012, all right? So.
See, I think some of us have 13 and some of us have 12.
Okay, 13 and 12, fine, but you can see the age. I mean.
We have 11.
Ah, you have 11.
Yeah, how about us?
Even better.
Thank you, Vanessa.
No, I didn't even give you guys the backstory of how all this came to be and how kind Jim was. I kind of full steam ahead decided we were going to do this, and there wasn't any wine in the market. So that's why we have such a fun mix of vintages and labels.
That's very fun. We had snowstorms, and the trucks and the ships and everything was totally screwed up. This was a number of weeks ago, started. So we've had very difficult shipping. It continues today. You know, it's I see online everybody's closing this and that, and even I'm glad everybody got some wine. But the older the better with this, I will tell you. So, but let's dive in, and I'm sure there's similarities. So let's see what we think.
There's a smoky, animal-y aspect to this.
Yes, Absolutely. Chocolate, smoky, depth, animal, exactly.
And I'm
I
getting
think
a
it's
lot
the
more.
smokiness
spice.
from the soil.
Yes, yes. Yeah, it's that volcanic nature of the soil. Sometimes it's blackberry, sometimes you get hints of violet, sometimes licorice, bitter chocolate flavors, smoky, black, pepper, spice, all kinds of different nuances that come out depending on which vintage you have, I guess. So,
Barbara, I think I interrupted you. I'm sorry.
No, I think
I think it needs
my
a,
husband.
it needs a formidable
Accompaniment.
accompaniment, yes.
absolutely, absolutely. So,
And
I'm
Lisa,
getting a lot more pronounced baking spices than I normally do on reds. Like normally I can pick out like, okay, baking spices. This one I can hone in on like there's nutmeg in this, there's cinnamon in this. Like those notes are really popping out for me.
that's the complexity, and
Yeah.
Is
hopefully
the oak new?
Uh, uh, typically they rotate. The new oak they usually use for a short period of time and season it before they would put wine into a long aging process in new oak. New oak would really extract vanilla qualities and a little aggressive characteristics. All of our wine, well, most, when I say all of our wineries, a lot of them don't use the small French oak, but the Slavoni oak is definitely not new. But when you use a new barrel, you usually try to season it before you very short period of time with some young wine, and then you start the process of aging more seriously. There is a reaction against new wood flavors, at least with our producers, because they want, again, what I said in the absolute beginning, you do not want to mask the expression of the fruit from the place it came from. And you can do that very easily. It's like too much makeup. I mean, you know,
What are you saying, Jim? No.
well, you know, a little bit you look beautiful, and then a little bit more you look like a, you know, a lady of the street, and then a little bit more you look like a clown from Ringling and Barnum and Bailey. You know, so it depends on, you know, and what you want to do. I think some of the wines that we see today are clown wines, and I don't like them. So
Yeah.
I'm glad that the wood is nuanced in, but it's still there because it comes up usually in the very finish. You can detect it definitely in the tannin structure. So let's see. Let me taste this again.
So Vanessa, when you said earlier that when you blind taste, you can often easily figure out if it's a Barolo Barbaresco. In my blind tasting group, Aglianico was allowed also, and that was one of the ones that I always found was fairly easy because you just look at it. Does it have as high a tannin as a Barolo or, you know, a really high quality Brunello? And yet it's way more dried, pruny fruit. And so then we always would just, and darker. So you just switch
color for
to,
sure.
to Tarossi because I mean, compare it to the Barolo, you would never mistake it
Right.
for a Barolo, even if it has similar tannin structure to it. Sorry, that's my phone. I should shut that off.
One of the things that I think is really interesting about this lineup, you know, everything being monovarietal and looking at the two grapes next to each other, there's always going to be some dissent, right? Because they both have such strong characteristics, high tannin, high acid. Not everyone is, I mean, that's kind of how wine is in general, but you have wines that are very friendly and affable and everyone loves them. Let's just call Pinot Noir one of those grapes. Well, this, which is not a bad thing at all, but to me, these wines are not going to make everybody happy. And that's what's kind of cool about them. That's what makes them more fun to pair and introduce people who've never been to Naples and never had Aglianico. So I hope you got, if you loved all the wines, great. But if you kind of have a clear favorite, I think that's awesome too. So
these are, again, I said in the very beginning, these are not wines made for a flavor profile. These are wines that reflect the authenticity of place. That's the beauty. I mean, I go to Vanessa every 2 weeks and buy a mixed case of stuff and, for different occasions. And right now I'm hooked on this little Grenache, but that's something else, and that's my Wednesday wine and my Thursday wine. And then in the weekend, we do something a little bit better. But, it's lovely to do different things for different occasions. And again, I'm always looking for a wine, and I read about them. I go back online, I see what she's been buying. I read about, you can find everything online now, about the wineries. I read about the interesting person that's in Southern Rhone that's making this little wine north of Orange. And so I would just order a case. And that's my gentle little wine when we just want something light, but it's not for every occasion. So again, these 4 wines are not for every mood. It's not an occasion, it's more of a mood, I mean, sometimes you'll open a bottle of Barolo and sit in the corner by yourself and drink the whole thing. I mean, I don't know, So enjoy all these. It's really fun to talk with you all. This was so much fun tonight.
Can I say something, Jim? You said something early on that I think is really important when you said that terroir doesn't just describe the soil or the climate, it also describes the person who makes the wine. And I think that that's something that people don't always think about, but it certainly addresses what you're talking about even about the little Grenache, the little Mandarin Grenache.
Yes.
That wine represents not just where it's from, but it represents the person who made it.
Yes.
And I think that's a huge part about winemaking that people don't always give enough credence to.
Yes, I read about that little fellow. And I absolutely agree. It's what I said it was human sensitivity.
Okay.
And to me, and if you want to look at just Italy, there was a technological revolution. We were talking earlier about the difficulty times of the peasant farmer, et cetera, and the water and all that. There was a technological revolution that occurred when they discovered stainless steel, temperature control, fermentation, and all this that everybody talks about today, California, everywhere. But the second revolution that started about a decade or so ago is the revolution of farming in more of an organic and natural way. And also that translates into the winemaking in a more gentle, less intrusive way with any chemical additions, et cetera, sulfites and whatever. That is what's going on in Italy today. And that's what you're drinking here today. It's not certified, but the Giovanni Rosso wines are all organically farmed, et cetera, for example. And so to me, the wines are tasting more expressive, more interesting. The nuances are there. It's not like everybody is a cookie cutter flavor. So the beauty of it is, and I'm going to compliment Vanessa, to me, the independent wine shop, and where I go in there and I sit there and look at her shelves and muck about and grab this bottle and that bottle. That's the beauty of life and the discovery of wine. It takes a little time, it takes a little effort, and I'm really happy that you took the effort to be here tonight. I really appreciate that.
I have a quick question before you sign off.
Yes, sir.
And sometimes I get lost in your words because I'm old, so I'm slow. So both these grapes are the same grape, correct? These last 2 wines.
The last 2 wines are 100% Aglianico, absolutely. And
So
the selection of fruit was different in terms of the vineyards and the age of the vines.
That's it. Okay, you answered my question.
Plus the winemaking technique was radically different.
Yeah. Because the first one I found a little, like I said, like a teenager, a little rough around the edges.
Yep.
But the second one, I'm ready to marry.
Well, I understand. Yeah, there's a depth and a rich, I understand, yeah.
Yeah.
That's called the Barolo of the South.
So then I need to ask you all, is it worth the splurge?
Well, first of all, I love the Aglianico, and I'm thankful that you introduced us to it because now I think it might be my new favorite grape. I would be fine with the first Aglianico. I don't know that I need to splurge and have the second one. They were both lovely in their own different ways, but I'd be okay with the first one.
But it was striking the comment Jim made about the difficulty of the first one, because we just thought that was perfect. It was so balanced. So they must have done a terrific job.
Well, we must admit our ignorance because we have no idea what the prices of the wines were. We just bought them. So someone could, and we went back to try to see what the prices were and we couldn't find them. So if somebody could help us out and tell us what the prices of the 4 wines were, because quite frankly, it was an unwined tasting and that's all we needed.
And we're in Connecticut now, so we miss you guys.
You guys are in Connecticut?
Yes, we are.
So both of the first flight, number 1 in each flight are under 25. The Aglianico is 17 and the Longue Nebbiolo is 25, $24.99. So that's how I said it's under 25. And then the Barolo is 50 and the Terrassi, I can't remember. I think it's 40. But what I was gonna ask is if Jess could send Jim's PowerPoint that had all the maps and all the education to everybody. I will also include an order form that shows you the pricing in case anyone wants additional wine. And also the Giovanni Rosso Barolo 2016 will be coming. And so we'll include that on there as well in case you want to secure some of that. But Christine, I'm with you. I was very surprised how much I enjoyed the straight Aglianico this evening. And like Jim said, it's totally nude because a lot of times I would feel like Anne felt, where it's just kind of like an assault on my palate. Like even though it's not a big tannic wine, it's powerful for, especially you pick it up at $17. You're not going to expect to go home and have something quite that like interesting and intense. So yeah, but thank you guys for just buying whatever we're selling for whatever price.
Well, somebody said it earlier. I can't remember who it was. It was like, well, it's unwind, so I'm going to trust it,
Right, exactly.
Little did I know when Jess invited me to this, living in New York, that I would end up buying an entire cake. And I'm like, you just tell me what I need to get. So what was supposed to be a relatively expensive night, although it was amazing. So thank you.
Aw. You guys are all so wonderful to join us, and you've all added something special to the mix. And Prue,
I see this big mistake.
Thank you.
Okay, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. It was such a great way to spend Thursday evening. Thanks so much.
In March, where we'll be celebrating women winemakers. We'll see you in March.
Oh, nice. Good.
Thanks, guys.
Everybody stay
Thank you,
warm
everybody.
and stay safe.
yes,
Yes.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.
Lisa,
Much
it was a pleasure.
appreciated, everybody. Thank you for being
And
here.
thank you, Jim.
Okay, ciao, ciao.
Jim, you rock.
I think it's worth the splurge.
It is worth the splurge.
It says it's disabled, you can't.
Oh, yeah.